Quito becomes a war zone as Ecuador's police respond with violence to another mass protest. The killing of a journalist fuels another day of demonstrations against Haiti's President Jovenel Moise. And the date is set for local elections in Trinidad and Tobago. The opposition said it is sure it will win on December the 2nd. Hello and welcome to Tell Us Our English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez and this is From the South. We begin in Ecuador, where another mass protest against austerity measures has suffered heavy repression from the security forces. The army and the police used armored cars and fired volleys of tear gas at the Indigenous and other protesters as they marched towards the presidential palace and the National Assembly. This is the ninth day of demonstrations and strikes against the economic package decreed by President Lenín Moreno as part of his deal with the IMF. Some of the protesters say the police also used live ammunition.
Nos vamos hasta conseguir.
We will continue until we achieve our objective, which is the immediate withdrawal of Decree 883. But they are repressing us right now. They're killing us with these weapons. These are 12-bore cartridges. They have a range of 30 to 60 meters. These are not rubber bullets. This is live ammunition which kills people. They are murdering our people. Lenín Moreno is killing his people, obeying the orders of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is killing the indigenous people of Ecuador and the world.
Medical students treated some of the protesters injured in the march. Human rights organizations reported on Thursday that 7 people have been killed in the last week of protests and over 500 people injured, 95 of them seriously, but those numbers are rising. Women protesters organized the evacuation of children from what had become almost a war zone. Many of the indigenous people arriving in the capital to join the protests have traveled with their entire families. The Indigenous and other protesters divided into 2 groups in the morning to the march to the Presidential Palace and the National Assembly. They say they wanted to take over the Parliament building permanently. Indigenous peoples from the northern and central highlands have all been converging on the capital Quito since Monday, where they join other social movements. Their leaders have said there cannot be no negotiations with the government until the repression stops, the ministers responsible are put on trial, and the economic measures are withdrawn. Overnight, large contingents of indigenous people from the country's Amazonian region arrived in Quito to join the protests that have paralyzed the nation since last Thursday. People from the Shuar, Quichua, Cofán, and Huaroni nationalities were greeted as their buses arrived. The mobilizations were sparked last week after the president announced he will end state subsidies for regular gas and diesel, among other austerity measures.
We heard that our brothers were being killed here, and we got really angry, because being there we couldn't defend you here. And as brothers and sisters we said no, we need to unite. Let's go to the presidential palace. If he wants to leave, we'll let him go. But if not, we will take the palace. That's the decision we took. We marched in Puyo and we seized the governor's office, because she also wouldn't listen to us. She never came to speak to us, to tell us what was happening. Never. That's why I say clearly and publicly, I took the governor's office. I went up and came back with the key. I am a Shuar woman, but don't play with me and my people. That's why I'm here. And tomorrow all my people will be here. And we will shed our blood if we have to.
Let's go to our correspondent Estefania Bravo, who is at the National Building in Quito with the protesters. Signals are being blocked in the area, so she joins us on the phone. Hello, Steffi. I understand there has been more repression outside the National Assembly. What's the situation now?
Hi, Jose Daniel. Thank you so much. Yes, as you mentioned, there has been more repression here outside of the National Assembly. Just a few minutes ago, the police forces threw tear gas canisters at the protesters who were outside of the National Assembly peacefully. They were sitting there and waiting there to get a chance to talk to President Lenín Moreno or even to the President of the National Assembly. The scene that we are seeing right now is chaotic. We are seeing thousands of citizens are mobilized. Many people are injured right now in the streets. There is gas. The tear gas is all over this neighborhood, and it's not only affecting the people that were outside of the National Assembly, but also the families that live close to the National Assembly. The families have also been affected by the tear gas that was thrown by the police. The people that were outside protesting were waiting, as I mentioned, to have a conversation with any head of the National Assembly, but all of a sudden, the police forces threw water cannons at the protesters. That in the middle of the protesters were women, were children, were a lot of people, and not only from the indigenous movements, but also students, citizens from all over Ecuador that have come to protest against the economic measures of President Lenín Moreno. We are seeing right now helicopters overflying the National Assembly. We're also seeing tear gas still being thrown. At this moment, tear gas was thrown again at the National Assembly. And this is a chaotic scene that I'm seeing right now. People are injured, as I mentioned, and the university students that are here that study medicine have come to the place and are helping with the people that are injured also.
So what are the protesters telling you about what happened today, and what do they intend to do next?
So, as I mentioned, people are here waiting for an answer by the legislative power. They were here protesting peacefully, and the indigenous movement want to talk with the president and see if they can find a solution. But they are very clear, and they have told me and have said it many times that people that they want Mr. President Lenín Moreno to eliminate the Executive Order 883 that eliminates subsidies. They are very firm on that, and they said they will still be on the streets, and they will be on the streets until he does that. So we are expecting to see what happens in the coming hours, in the coming minutes. We cannot be sure of what happens because, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, people were outside of the National Assembly, very calm, waiting for an answer from their leaders, but all of a sudden the police repressed them heavily, and not only them, but also journalists that were covering the news there, not only from Philippines, but from all over the world that are covering this news, and also citizens, regular citizens that live near the neighborhood that are just watching what is happening. And the people that are here are telling the police that they have betrayed them because while they were outside waiting just for an answer, the police forces told the people that they need to be calm because nothing is going to happen, and they are not going to do any harm to them. Now, as you know, that didn't happen, and the police repressed them very, very hardly, and the consequences we have seen because of the people that are injured and also the people that feel betrayed. Ecuadorians feel betrayed because of what what police forces did at this moment, Jose.
So talking about President Lenín Moreno, he gave a short TV address a couple of hours ago. What did he say? What other government leaders say? Anything?
Yes, President Lenín Moreno gave a press conference maybe an hour ago, and it is a little bit illogical because what he mentioned is that violence needs to stop, that he asked the people to stop violence, and that he also asked the indigenous leaders for them to meet and to have a conversation. He also mentioned that he is not going to eliminate the Executive Order 883 that, as we all know, eliminates gasoline subsidies. Well, Lenín Moreno said that he wants that he says and wants for the violence to stop. But then 1 hour later, the police forces throw gas at people that were protesting peacefully. So that is a little bit illogical for me. And as a journalist and as an Ecuadorian, I feel very sad, and there's no words to explain what I'm seeing right now, Jose. This is unbelievable that people were protesting peacefully, police forces didn't think twice before repressing the people that were there.
Well, thank you so much, Estefania, for that information. That was our correspondent, Estefania Bravo, here in capital Quito. Moving on, the killing of a journalist in Haiti has fueled fresh protests in the country's capital, Port-au-Prince. Protests erupted a few hours after the reporter who had covered previous anti-government protests was found shot to death in his car. Demonstrators burned tires and spilled oil on streets in parts of the capital. They are continuing their push for President Jovenel Moise to step down and face prosecution for his alleged crimes of corruption. Haitians have also expressed their disappointment and anger at the continuing U.S. support for President Moise.
I want Jovenel Moise to go. He is involved in the murder that happened in La Saline. Many children can't go to school. I want him to go. He has to go. We can't put up with this misery. It is too much. Down with Jovenel.
We are headed to Pétionville, where we'll camp for 2 hours. Once we're there, the president will not have any other choice but to hand us his resignation letter within 2 hours. If he doesn't hand it to us, we'll come get it in his house. All neighborhoods must stand up.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. University students in Colombia marched on Wednesday to defend public education in the country. They said the government has failed to comply with previous agreements, including the disbursement of millions of dollars for education sector.
Hundreds of students took to the streets of Colombia to demand that the government adhere to an agreement they made to invest millions of dollars in public universities, to investigate corruption and to dismantle riot police squadrons.
The agreements we reached last year were left printed on the page. The school deficit is the same, and we have not received any funds. Conditions are the same in public universities. We don't even have proper classrooms to study in.
In Bogotá, students marched to Congress. They want the dean of Bogotá's district university to be investigated for misuse of public funds.
Recently, a scandal broke out about the dean's misuse of the university's funds. There were even reports that some of the funds were used to pay sex workers.
But the day was not only to visibilize student demands. Victims of the armed conflict march as well to honor the memories of the thousands who have been killed, disappeared, or tortured for expressing their political views.
As the families of victims, it's important to honor their memory and never forget how their human rights were violated.
University students will evaluate the possibility of starting a general strike in the next few days, as they continue to demand that the government provide the funds they already agreed to disburse for the education system.
It's official. Monday, December 2nd, 2019 is the day that Trinidad and Tobago will vote in local government elections. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has announced the long-awaited date. The last local elections was held in 2016. In a brief statement issued by the Office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley also indicated that the summons of elections will be issued in due course. 8 of the country's 14 municipal corporations are controlled by the ruling P&M party, while the opposition holds the remaining 6 corporations. While opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar is urging her rival to bring it on, saying she's confident of the victory at the polls. During her budget response in Parliament, she also challenged the PM to call the general election date.
The contempt which this government has for the poor was on full display on Monday when the minister came to this house and threw out crumbs to the most vulnerable persons in our country. That contempt was compounded yesterday by none other than the Honourable Prime Minister, with his sub-story at the spotlight to make excuses for his government's failure to manage the economy since they entered office. Since he cannot do the job, I say don't make excuses, call the elections now.
The Bahamas government is taking legislative steps to make evacuations mandatory and implement curfews prior to a storm. This as people refuse to pay attention to the warnings of the Prime Minister ahead of Hurricane Dorian, which destroyed the islands, leaving over 60 dead, hundreds missing, and thousands displaced. The proposed amendments say that if a person refuses to leave a specific area without justifiable cause, they are liable to fine $500, 1 month of prison, or both. Additionally, first responders will not rescue people who refuse to leave until the meteorological service gives all the all clear. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. An Iranian oil tanker in the Red Sea has been hit by what are thought to be 2 missiles off the coast of Saudi Arabia. According to the National Iranian Tanker Company, the hull of the ship suffered 2 separated explosions when it was about 100 kilometers off the Saudi port city Jeddah. It said the ship is stable and denied reports it has been set ablaze. There has been no claim of responsibility yet. This follows attacks on the other tankers in the Gulf in May and June, as well as strikes on Saudi oil sites in September. Residents from the border villages of Turkey and Syria were caught in the crossfire in the 3rd day of Turkish military operations against Turkish fighters in northeast Syria. The lives of residents who did not evacuate the nearby villages are at grave risk. Many have laid their loved ones to rest. At least 3 civilians were reportedly killed and dozens injured in Turkish border towns by mortars and rockets fired from Syria on Thursday. Early this week, Turkey launched its Operation Peace Spring. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the operation was designed to eliminate terrorism along its border and establish a safe zone to facilitate the return of Syrian refugees.
They said he came to Akakale for work on that day when he was hit and badly wounded. I still can't believe he's dead. We were good friends, so I'm really sad. It's hard for me to express how I feel right now. I hope no one else will be killed.
Now I'm worried about my children. We don't leave them to stay alone at home. We take them to school and pick them up from school. We don't have any protection. But we're not thinking about moving out now, since we have a life here and we don't want to leave our home.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Islamic State militias held in northeast Syria could escape as a result of Turkish military operation.
There are areas where ISIS combatants are concentrated. So far, they have been guarded by the Kurdish military. Now, as the Turkish army enters the area, Kurds leave these camps where ISIS combatants are kept. They can just run away. I am not sure how fast the Turkish army can take the situation under control. It is a real threat to us all. Where will they head? Through Turkey, or take another way, or deeper into Syria? To the territories nobody controls, then to Iraq, to move somewhere else, other countries of the region. We have to understand that, know that, and mobilize the resources of our intelligence services to prevent this new emerging threat.
The Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, has won the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. This, although his reforms have sparked ethnic tensions, which has led to violence and subsequent displacement of 2.5 million people. Still, the world recognizes Ahmed's efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation, and in particular his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with Eritrea. Elected in April last year, he negotiated a peace deal which ended a 20-year military settlement with Eritrea.
The situation between the two countries ran into a deadlock, so it needed that courage somehow to change the situation, and that's really what happened. and credit goes to the Prime Minister for doing that. But on the other hand, it was, I would rather say now, it was pushed too fast, and you know, after a year, we haven't seen also full-scale institutionalization of that peace process.
Meanwhile, world leaders have shared their thoughts on Abiy Ahmed's Nobel Peace Prize. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Abiy's vision helped Ethiopia and Eritrea achieve a historic reapproachment, while the African Union head Moussa Faki said the Prime Minister's peace efforts have given the world hope. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, supporters of the president have protested after a cargo plane that provided logistical assistance for one of his trips went missing. Demonstrators are accusing the former president Joseph Kabila of attending a coup d'etat. President Felix Tshisekedi returned to Kinshasa on Thursday evening after a 4-day visit to the east of the country when his cargo plane disappeared. The country's civil aviation authority says 8 people were on board the plane and have found no trace of the aircraft. A search operation has been ordered.
This is a spontaneous demonstration because the people heard there was a plane crash in the president's parade.
It is not an accident. It is well programmed. It is a state of the art. It is a well-prepared coup d'etat, well-planned.
South Africa's High Court has dismissed the bid by former President Jacob Zuma to drop his corruption trial. Back in March, Zuma requested for his case to be permanently dropped on the grounds that it was politically motivated. His trial is expected to begin next week after the judge ruled that Zuma's application for the permanent stay is dismissed with cause. He is accused of taking bribes from a French defense company during the 1990s in his role as a chairman of the African National Congress. Still in South Africa, one environmental activist is using his work to preserve indigenous fish to create jobs for locals. Our correspondent Matuba Malachi has more.
Two birds with one stone is not quite a good thing to say when we are talking about preserving nature, but that's more or less what Kruger does at this fish breeding farm in Hartbeespoort. He breeds South African indigenous fish, and he says this is not only to grow his business, but to also save the environment.
My business spectrum is wide, it's big. It's save the environment, breed small fish so that the bird life, you know, bird and fish together is a compartment. Now the eating side of the fish, people poaching fish a lot, as all over Africa and some other places of the world. We can rather take that people, if there's money, train them, put up their own fish farm and they breed your own fish.
Chance Chuma is one of the people Kruger trained and helps him run the farm. He says all the fish grow in fresh water, another scarce natural resource.
Yeah, it's just fresh water, but sometimes we did add the pool salt. Then the potassium, manganite, that pepper stuff. Yeah. That is only when the fishes are new.
South Africa has many species of edible fish, and not even half of them are kept at this farm. Some of the fish take up to 8 months before they are ready to leave the farm, but where do they go?
We sell currently about 3 tons of fish to the public, and it's freshwater fish. Our people always say, no, how can you eat freshwater fish? We eat meat and T-bones and chops. But we breed fish, and this is the future. Freshwater fish is the future.
Conservation efforts we've seen in Hartbeespoort Dam, there can be some sort of certainty on how we can put food on the table, like you see here. But with political will, there can be even more certainty for sustainability. Matua Masachi in Hartbeespoort for Telesur.
Thank you, Matua, for that report. And finally, the first person ever to walk in space, Alexei Leonov, has died at the age of 85. Leonov reportedly died after suffering from a long illness and will be buried this month. The cosmonaut made history in 1965 when he stepped outside his spacecraft for just over 12 minutes and floated around attached by a cord. And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Our English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.
The life is full of moments